Hello. Can you hear me, Will?
Hello?
Hey, Desiree, can you hear us?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I let Evan in. You do have 3 other people in the waiting room. Would you like me to permit them?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait.
Thank you. Not too bad.
And
Yeah,
Desiree, or Will, I believe the host, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. When we're presenting, would you mind turning that off?
Of course, or I can allow you to share. Is it just going to be you?
Yeah, just me and Ashley. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you should be able to share now.
Cool. Okay. Yes, I see that. Thank you.
All right. Well, Evan, I think once you can get the slide deck shared, I think we're okay to start.
You're okay to, okay. Sounds good. I will do that. One second. One second.
Rich and everybody in the room, just wanted to apologize for not making it down. I've been battling this virus thing over the last couple of weeks, and I think I'm afraid I'm maybe still contagious. Just wanted to spare y'all.
There's some stuff going around for sure.
Oh, ponies.
Some nasty stuff. It's not. This isn't just your mom's flu. This is whatever that is.
Evan, you have presenter mode on.
You're sharing the present. Yeah. Probably other screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me.
Sure.
Okay. You can tell me if you see the regular version.
That's it.
Okay. Great. Well, we appreciate all you coming, and we look forward to talking to you today about the existing conditions along Route 6 in Woodbury and what we found, and critically, the next steps and how we're going to proceed. So the agenda for today, we're going to just do a little introduction, move on to goals and objectives of the planning report, give you some background of the area. Then after that, we're going to go into the existing conditions report and the findings that we came up with. And then finally, like I said, we're going to talk about next steps and how we're going to proceed. So if I could, here's just a meet the team slide. And I was thinking we could just do a quick round of introductions, if that sounds good. If the first select woman is on, we'd love to hear from you.
Do you guys want to go around the table first in the room there, maybe, and then yeah, we could rattle off the online folks.
Barbara Ferguson, first selectman.
Will Agresta, town planner.
I'm Rich Donovan, the Transportation Planning Director for the Naugatuck+Valley Council of Governments.
Judith Kells, Historic Commission. Kathy Doyle, Shade Tree and Sidewalk Committee.
Mary Conley, Planning Commission.
Tayo Lale, Transportation Planner, NVCOG.
We have a couple other people in the room.
Paul Zolper, resident.
There's Jack on the other chair.
That's my deck.
So that's the room.
Okay, great. So I was just saying who's on. So Casey, if you'd like to present, if you'd like to.
Hi, sure. My name is Casey Harden. I'm the project manager for AECOM, and with me we have a couple members of our team.
Yep. Hi,
Evan and Ash.
yeah. Hi, Ashley Bertome. I'm the traffic lead on the project.
Evan Moorman, I'm the bike ped lead and assisting with outreach as well. Okay, sounds good. Move on. So what are the overall goals of this project? We're charged with studying how to reduce safety concerns along Route 6 and improve access and connectivity north-south along that route. We have to do this in keeping with the town's historic character. We understand that we're working in a extremely historic location. We partnered with historic preservationists and such to ensure that anything we suggest ultimately will be consistent with your town's character and unique history. Now, as you can see here on the map on the right, we have two historic districts, historic district number 1 and number 2. Those are the actual names. The first district is up here on the north, and the second district is up here on the south. Now, critically, we're also looking at the intersection of Quanapog Trail and Route 6. As you can see here on the left map, that's shown by the red star. That's a location of concern. It's technically, outside of the geographic scope of the main area, but we are working with NVCOG, who's already done a lot of work on this, to make sure that anything we propose will be consistent with what is installed there, what the steps we're taking there for safety. So just to give you a little area description, area background, as many of you likely know, the town of Woodbury is in the Naugatuck+Valley in Litchfield County. It's founded in 1673, so a very old town for our country. It's about a little less than 10,000 people, and it's experienced pretty intense growth from about 1940 to 2010. Interestingly, the population actually fell a little bit between 2010 and 2020. That could be for many reasons, right? Possibly related to COVID. So the main street is also a state route, Route 6. So there's this tension, right, between it being a state route and a local, key access for the town residents. Continue on. So there's two historic districts, as I mentioned. Historic district number 1 is in the center of the town. It contains that town center, what you think of. It's mostly linear. It extends outwards to a few intersecting streets, a few little corridors. And this has a wide variety of homes from the colonial revival style. There's the town offices, City Hall, 5 churches, 3 green cemetery, etc. Woodbury Historic District number 2 is also largely linear. It extends about 1 mile along Main Street to the south to the town line. This is more rural. It has fewer sidewalks, or no sidewalks rather, and it's more residential. But again, it has that colonial revival feel, a lot of open space, so it's very beautiful. So there's these two historic districts that we want to ensure we take into account. Now, where are people living? Here we have a population density map. As you can see, I've noted the approximate extent of the main business district. And as you can see here, it's shaded by population density. So the population is, along Route 6 in that sort of north-central area, north of Judson Avenue, roughly, south of Middle Turnpike. But there are these other areas, key areas of density, right? You can see the one to the left on Sherman Hill Road, that's a condo. There's another area of high density, sort of near Flanders Road. So we want to make sure that we're connecting where people live to the center of town and ultimately to each other. The corridor description is what I'll talk about next. It's a 2-way urban minor arterial. Most intersections along the corridor are unsignalized, but there are a variety of signalized intersections. There are only 4, rather. Speed limit is 30 miles per hour in the central section that rises north and south of that central downtown area. There are pedestrian facilities, and we should say sidewalks, but there are no bicycle accommodations as of now. And interestingly, sidewalks are mostly on one side of the road, and in varying conditions. So we want to make sure that people can access that Route 6 on both sides, right? And it includes Flanders Road, which is the furthest north intersection, and Middle Quarter Road, which is the furthest south intersection. So the primary intersections going north to south are Flanders, Washington Road, Pleasant Street, Sycamore Avenue, Sherman Hill Road, and Middle Quarter Road. Those are the dark orange highlights, as you can see here in the map. There are other intersections which are also important, which we're calling secondary, but they have other needs, and those are in the light orange here, as you can see it. Middle Road, Judson Avenue, Park Road, Hollow Road area, etc. All the primary intersections identified here are signalized except for Flanders. So we want to obviously tie into what has been done, all the good work that's been done in your town so far, which we'll talk about right now. There are 4 sort of previous planning efforts, previous studies that we looked at and wanted to make sure to incorporate to the best extent we could. Those are the Woodbury Plan of Conservation and Development. That was done only 4 or 5 years ago. There was creating a sustainable Main Street report, which was done by the Urban Land Institute in 2016, which sort of looked at urban design features of your town. There's a state effort, CTDOT, US Route 6, 61, and Quaspog Road intersection improvement. That's CTDOT work. And then there's the NVCOG Metropolitan Transportation Plan, NVCOGCT. So the first one, the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development, has been done, and it came out at the time in 2020 with a variety of sidewalk recommendations. This map here on the right shows at that time where there was sidewalks, and then also in 2024, the Shade Tree and Sidewalk Committee in the town sort of took that and made other recommendations. So as you can see here on the right, these numbers represent the locations that in 2024 were recommended, what they're calling shorter term recommendations, which are the numbers in the circle. And then they have these visionary recommendations, which are, a little longer term, but are important. So we want to make sure that our plan, of course, corresponds with the recommendations here. At the time, the POCD identified safety issues. Happily, the town's per capita crash rate is below the statewide average, which is good. Interestingly, in 2018, the data showed that about a little less than half of crashes occurred on Route 6 in the town. So in the entire town, almost half of the crashes are occurring there, which makes sense. Another quarter occurred on other state roads. So only about a quarter, the last quarter, are occurring on local roadways. So we're gonna have to, make sure that we make recommendations in line with state, state recommendations and state coordination. In 2018, there was 1 pedestrian-involved crash, no bicyclist-involved crashes. However, it's important to look, when you're talking about bike and ped, it's important to look at sort of how many people are using the network right now, and then how many, are being dissuaded from using it because of perceived or real safety issues. So you have to look deeper there. The POCD identified sort of key safety areas: Judson Avenue, the Route 661 area, Route 664, and Route 6 Pleasant Street, Washington Road. Those are areas that have, at the time, had safety issues and continue to be on our radar. The Urban Land Institute came in and conducted a report. This is the second on that bulleted list in your town of how to improve the public space in the town. So they took a look at sort of that central area of the town and 4 greens in the town: Common Green, Town Hall Green, Post Office Green, and North Green, and really think about how to improve those areas in isolation, but also connect them to one another via a variety of interventions. So if I could just spend one more minute on this. So the specific recommendations at that time were to install multi-use paths on both sides of Route 60 Main Street from North Green to Cannon Green. And then outside of the central section, it recommended a multi-use path on only one side. There's fewer people there, lower density, so that was their recommendation. Other recommendations they had are replacing the shoulder with parking where possible, except during snow, they were careful to note. Replacing existing crosswalks with high visibility crosswalks and adding what are called bulb outs or mid-block sort of extensions of the curb to shorten crossing distance, increase visibility of crossers, etc. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but this is the statewide effort that is improving the Route 60-61 Quassapog Road area. The state CTDOT is proceeding with designing a modern roundabout. As you can see here on the image, they're realigning, widening 4 legs of the intersection, and a roundabout, is expected to and has been shown to decrease high-speed angle injury crashes. So, decrease the most dangerous type of crashes. Finally, we have the NVCOG Metropolitan Transportation Plan. The overall goals for the region here are listed. I won't list them all myself, but some critical goals that they call out are expanding multimodal opportunities, enhancing bike ped facilities, sustainability, and promote economic development and revitalization. I think the latter certainly goes hand in hand with our charge to make recommendations in line with Woodbury's historic status, in line with sort of the desire to support the existing antiquing economy. Moving on to the general pedestrian network, which we assessed when we visited the town several times. As you can see here on the map, the orange line shows where there are existing sidewalks. And the red circles show the curb ramps. So as you can see here, this is showing the northern section of the town. There are, generally speaking, sidewalks on one side, in this case, the west side. And there have been, improvements, especially around the schools, in terms of increasing sidewalk coverage and increasing curb ramp coverage. But as you can see here, there's still large sections of the town that don't have it. And as I said, Route 6 only has it on one side here. And here's just a view of that same southern side. So here, south of Hollow Road, you see that there are no sidewalks on the west side, only on the east side, and other important streets. Sherman Hill Road, for example, 317, do not have sidewalks, nor does Park Road. In terms of public transportation, there is currently no public transportation along Route 6. There are some fairly close rail stations, approximately 20 minutes away. Waterbury Station here is an image shown on the right. Also, there's Naugatuck Station for Metro North. Interestingly, CTDOT has a micro transit pilot project that is just beginning in certain sections of the state, including in the southern Naugatuck+Valley. It's currently not available for Woodbury, though.
Yeah, if I can just jump in real quick, Evan, because I know that is a recurring question and
Thank you.
a real
Sore point.
Yeah. So within the Naugatuck+Valley region, we are actually 7 bus operators in our 19 towns, as well as many towns that don't have service at all. But one of those, and the only one that we have any real direct control over, is the Valley Transit District. So VTD operates in the 4 lower Naugatuck+Valley towns: Ansonia, Derby, Seymour, and Shelton. And they do the demand response service. So the EDA supplementary services and then dial-a-ride services to supplement CT Transit's New Haven District and the Greater Bridgeport Transit District. So they don't do any fixed route, just demand response. But as part of this pilot, CONDOT awarded, I want to say it was 7 programs. It was just about 12 million total for a 2-year period to allow these 7 transit districts to experiment with microtransit. So an on-demand, app-driven, available to everybody service. And so far, thankfully, the results have been fantastic. At least ours. I haven't seen some of the other transit districts, but I know it's working really well in Estuary, out by the old Saybrook area, lower Connecticut River Valley. And it's been great for us. It's a really limited service in terms of the number of hours, and we're seeing tons of rides every month. So while this is still probably a long way off, and I wish I could say it wasn't, but we are hopeful that this is a model that can be replicated throughout our region. One of the things that we have been very vocal about taking on is a study to look at the consolidation of the Greater Woodbury Transit District and the Valley Transit District into one broader Naugatuck+Valley supportive district. And if that's the case, then we would have an operator in this area who has experience with microtransit, and as funds hopefully further funds become available from CTDOT, we would love to replicate this service here in town. So I know this is it's a lot of ifs and whens.
But
To start.
at least it's a start.
Yeah,
It's a
it is
start.
something we are actively working on.
Yes.
I do want to point out one other point here, which is that a bill was just raised in this legislative session. We have no idea how far it may go. There's not even language for it yet. It is still very preliminary. But to establish a rural transportation fund or a rural public transit fund.
Do you know the bill number?
I do. It is 6829. And I will confirm that before I leave, just to make sure I didn't tell you
I know
wrong.
how to look it up.
Like I said, it's still very preliminary, but we think if it does have any legs and if it does go somewhere, it could be a promising start to bringing at least some regular transit here into town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Evan.
No, thank you, Rich. So as I said, these are the study area intersections. Moving north, we're at Flanders Road, and then all the way south to Middle Quarter Road. There are 5 primary intersections, like I said, 4 of which are signalized. There's the flashing light signal at Quanapog Trail, which is the one, unsignalized. There are sidewalks from Washington Road to Doolittle Hill Road. And so sidewalks were on both sides for only half the segment. The cross section of the road is about 33 feet. So we're not talking about a huge cross section to work with, at least for the roadway. It's generally flat with some hills in the south, fewer hills in the north. And there are some curves around Mountain Road, Judson Avenue, around South Pomerog Avenue and Middle Quarter Road, and around Curtis Road, which may present possible visibility issues. There is street lighting placed about every 150 to 300 feet. Again, that varies significantly. So, sorry. Actually,
If I can interrupt one more time, I know that the slide deck that he is presenting does not align exactly.
No, it's not in the same order.
Okay.
We have cut some of, and actually, if I can just throw in a little extra background. I know a lot of this feels repetitive to work that has been done, and it feels like a very in-depth analysis of what's already out there, which you all already know. Because this is a state road, and because CTDOT gets to make the decisions about what happens out here, we have to do this level of background
Right.
detail.
No, that makes sense.
It's
And so we
perfectly
pulled a
fine.
lot of that
Yeah,
out from the
that's fine.
presentation today, just so that we're not spending too long.
We
on things
appreciate
that
it.
you already
Great,
know.
thank you.
So there will be slides up here that don't exactly correlate to
That's
what
fine.
you have in the pages in front of you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
thank you for
figured
that clarification.
Yeah.
Ashley, if you'd like to present
Yeah,
these.
sure. So I
Yeah.
can jump in here. So as far as like crossings, the whole corridor itself, it feels like there's a little bit of a lack of crossings and visibility for those crossings if they are already existing, which I think you guys are aware of, which Evan already talked about before. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time belaboring that point and where there is crossings and not, but we know there's a deficiency. Do you want to go to the next slide, Evan? All right, I'm going to start talking about like the vehicle traffic that's on this corridor. So in general, there's about 400 to 600 cars, throughput cars on the corridor in your peak hours. So that's morning and evening peak hours, which is well below capacity for a road such as this, especially a US state road, or a US DOT road. It's usually capacity can be up to 1,100 cars in some of these types of corridors, 800, 1,100, somewhere in there, depending on the signals, the size, and all of that. So just looking at it from a volume standpoint, we are below capacity, or you guys are below capacity through this corridor. You can move.
You know, I'm picturing sometimes when it's not flowing, like, wow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That
So,
would affect-
and then overall, if you look at the intersections from an overall perspective, they all operate at or above an acceptable LOS or a level of service. And I drove the corridor several times, and I do it during peak period in the evening, and I was doing the speed limit. I was doing about 30, 35 from one end to the other, and I had to wait at some of the signals, but I didn't have to wait multiple cycles. I was waiting for that cycle, that queue cleared, and I went. And even the actuations with PEDs didn't make the queues super crazy. So I think overall, looking at the volume and looking at the overall operations, the corridor is operating fairly well. That's not to say there couldn't be some signal improvements. That's not to say that there shouldn't be a few more crossings with productive PED phases or such as that, but it is operating fairly well. There are a couple key movements that if you pull apart the intersections that are operating below an acceptable level of service, one of them being the westbound movement at Justin Ave. And Mountain Ave. But again, that could just be a matter of, okay, there's a little more volume there. We got to adjust the cycle timing, and that will be talked about in like the future conditions or what we recommend for improvements along the corridor.
And so just to throw out another note here, level of service is a measure of ultimately it's basically how long do you sit waiting for the signal to change for you.
Your delay.
Well, for this, as we were talking about here, this is measuring level of service for drivers only.
Yep.
Right. And so just because the signals work well for people driving does not necessarily mean they serve the overall needs of the corridor well. And that's one of the things that as we get into future conditions, we'll be looking at, and possibly some of these that are operating at a level of service A right now may not in the future, because they'll be designed to better serve pedestrians or cyclists than just drivers as of now.
Before she picks up, what are considered the peak hours that you would have been looking at these things?
Yeah.
So, the overall, I don't remember the exact time of the hours, but we looked at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning, and then we looked at 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the evening.
Thank you.
I can find you the exact hours, but those are the ranges, and we looked at all the volume for all those ranges, and then we just did some analysis for some of the hours.
Yeah. And
And
so
just-
just I did pull that up. So the AM peak hour is between 11 and 12
Yeah.
is when the heaviest traffic in the morning is, and between 4 and 5 p.m. in the evenings.
That's the midday peak, the 11 to 12. There's an AM peak that we looked at that's different than the midday peak.
The morning peak of like 7 to 8 in the morning.
So depending on the part of the corridor, what I was looking at, we hung counters that will they use radar to count the number of vehicles as well as speed. And so the further south you go on the corridor, the earlier that AM peak moves. But this was just looking at like the busiest hour before noon. And so this one, which was located at somewhere further south on the corridor, had a 7 a.m. peak hour. Yeah. And so, but as Ashley said, right, they studied a longer period than just a single hour.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, we can talk about it, or I can go into crashes. We can keep going. So the other thing we looked at was not only the traffic, the vehicle traffic, and how that influences the roadway and everything, but also the crashes that happen and the safety aspect, because that'll also play a big role in pedestrians and where we want to put crossings and sight lines and distances like that. And these are the crash patterns, not severity along the corridor. So don't get that confused with like fatalities or any of that, just showing where the big pockets of crashes actually occur. And the majority of those crashes are actually, I think it's, what is it, Washington Road at Pleasant Street. And when you look at the crashes overall, like all the different types, there's predominantly a rear end crash problem, which that tells me that one, the yellow time and the red time at a signal might not be long enough. or people are just following so close to each other that they're just not leaving that wiggle room. So it's just something to maybe educate the public on and be like, hey, like we gotta work on this, or we can talk about speed and how we reduce speed and all of that. And that can be part of the recommendations. And some of the other signals, you have a breadth of different types of crashes. You're not just looking at rear ends, you're looking at side swipes, which could be same direction side swipes, mean like they're trying to get around a left or a right turn. There's a few different patterns, but overall, the main type of crash is rear end. And then after that, it's a whole mix of crashes. So it's just about, why is this happening? What can we do to improve that throughout? Not like specific treatments for its typical type of crash, like a rear end, where we can talk about those treatments, which the first one would be to look at the yellow and red time type of treatments. So we will look at that for the future. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Evan to talk about our safety walk assessment that we did.
Yes. So we visited your town this summer to complete a safety walk assessment, which I'll describe what that is. So a safety walk assessment, it's an interactive public event. It involves planners, ourselves, engineers, town leadership, city regional staff, and most importantly, members of the community. What does it do? It allows local decision makers and staff, the opportunity to go into the town and experience the transportation network on the ground as pedestrians. So it's an important venue for community members to tell us issues that they have identified already, that they experience in their day-to-day life. It allows us to go deeper than just looking at the data. We can sort of take the data, take the analysis we've already done, and see how that translates into the real world, as it were. It also allows us to gather field data. We looked at items such as sightline distances at a few locations where people had told us, that there was inadequate sightlines. We also looked at some signal phasing strategically. And as I said, it's just an opportunity to verify that, where we're using Google Maps, GIS data sources, town sources, that, on the ground conditions are X. This is important too when there's recent roadway changes or when there's construction, right? We can see how that construction's functioning and sort of the latest and greatest of the town. So like I said, we did that last summer. We met at Town Hall. We utilized the sidewalks along Route 6. We started going north. We crossed at Mountain Road from east to west, and then we turned south again to cross at Route 317, Sycamore Ave, because there was not a sidewalk on the west side. So we used a sidewalk on the east side there to go south. And then we all went all the way down to Hollow Road and returned to the Town Hall Library area. So we paid special attention here to the crossing experiences. We all crossed together. Of course, that can have, of course, drivers can react differently to large crowds than they do often to individuals, but it did allow us to experience what the pedestrians are experiencing. So here's just another map of the entire route, the entire study area, I should say, and then the items that are sort of in the red boxes are the intersections that we saw on the safety walk assessment route. So as you can see, we didn't go to all of them. We just sort of went to that central section in order to keep it accessible and fairly short. But separately, Ashley, myself, others went out and took data measurements on all the other intersections and sort of the corridor in general. So what are people telling us? What did people tell us? There's some speeding observed. Many people noted that there are many of those who are speeding are, truck drivers and others who are sort of using this as a cut through, right? They're not going to locations within the town. They're using it, as a state highway. So that was a really common theme we heard. As Ashley sort of alluded to, there's limited crossings along the corridor, especially in the sort of the southern section of that central portion. There are, really limited opportunities to cross unless one jaywalks, right? And there's limited sidewalks east-west. So even in locations where we have that sidewalk along Route 6, many people really emphasized to us, hey, I have a hard time getting to and from Route 6, and so thus I don't walk, or thus my kids, I don't feel safe having them walk, right? Another point that we heard a lot, the final point I'll mention here today, is that the sidewalk should go north to Flanders Road, cross that river, and go to Flanders Road to really tie in more of that northern section of the town. So that was a really valuable arena to do our stakeholder outreach. That gave us probably the most background from town residents, staff, political leaders, and others. We did conduct other stakeholder outreach, though. We really wanted to talk to the business community. As I mentioned, there's many churches, a large storied, religious community in your town. So we really wanted to talk to them to the extent we could. So I and others conducted 4 interviews with individuals. There was the first individual was a state trooper, now associated with St. Paul's Episcopal Church. I talked to staff from the Department of Senior Services, the Woodbury Senior Center. We talked to a VP of an insurance company. I won't share the name, but associated with the Woodbury Chamber of Commerce. We sort of used them to solicit views from the wider chamber. And then we wanted to talk to the schools. There's a lot of schools in this area. There's a lot of students using Route 6. So we talked to a director of operations from Mitchell Elementary School. And again, I just want to summarize the common themes we've heard. There's limited ped bike infrastructure. There's a lot of, sort of general speeding concerns on Route 6 with many near misses. One thing I heard a lot about was, the crashes just aren't sufficient. We see a lot of near misses, near crashes. There's limited opportunities for pedestrians to cross Route 6, especially, in the southern portion of that central section. A very common, crash type, as Ashley mentioned, was many drivers, sort of whip around left turning cars. Even when there's inadequate space or sort of uncertain space, that can create dangerous situations. Either they can, almost hit a pedestrian or hit the car. A few of them noted topographical concerns, especially for drivers making lefts. They couldn't see the roadway. They couldn't see cars coming toward them. Lack of yielding, for pedestrians, especially near Mountain Road. Many people mentioned Le Bon's Market. There's a lot of traffic there at that driveway, especially at the holiday season, people mentioned. So that's something we want to look at and take into account. And then there's poor sidewalk condition and a limited network on the roads going to Route 6. And as I mentioned, we are considering Quanapog Trail, that's outside of sort of our central section, but that is another area we heard so many people at the safety walk assessment, but also the interviews we did and from this group, that this is a concern. There's pretty high speed traffic on Route 6 going southbound, sort of coming into town. Many people haven't, slowed down sufficiently. And there is that flashing light for drivers on Route 6 that alerts them that they should be on the lookout for drivers exiting Quanapog. There's a grade change we saw. We sort of took some measurements on that may present sort of visual difficulties for left turning northbound drivers. There's a curve issue. So those curve issues, the grade change, make some sight line issues. So the town critically has already created a memo detailing concerns here and possible interventions. And we have been and we will continue to work with the town on that final report and NVCOG as well. So we want to really sort of assure everyone here, assure others that we know that this is an area of concern. It's not in our central section, but we really want to account for that moving forward. So if I could just conclude with next steps, I'll go through this quickly. There's speeding concerns. Many residents, you've all expressed concerns about people not slowing down. You're coming from a rural roadway, they're going fast, they're using it as a cut through, and they're just not slowing down in the center of town, which is in a traditional New England town center. It's hard to cross east-west. That limits the town's potential for you all who live there, also for visitors who come in to antique or do other activities. It's hard to get to key parks, Oronog Park, other parks. There's inadequate ped bike infrastructure. And, you know, there's this central tension we've heard repeatedly, and maybe we'll hear it today, about Route 6 is at once, you know, a state highway. It's an important role in the regional transportation network. Many people use it to cut through without stopping, but it's also a town where 10,000 people live and love. So we want to make sure that it's a place that it's a destination, as well as a place to spend time with family and friends, as well as, you know, beyond being a cut through for the state highway network. So the next steps, you know, we are really looking forward to getting your feedback on what we've done so far. We welcome any and all comments, of course. We have a public outreach meeting coming up here on February 18th, in about two weeks. So we're preparing for that. And we are then moving on to future conditions. So we're going to create an initial corridor concept at a pretty high level to address some of the safety, comfort, access issues we found. And we really want to break that into, you know, we're going to have long-term recommendations, of course, sort of best practices in the long term. But we also heard from many people, hey, you need to identify some quick fixes now. What can we do now for limited amount of money, limited effort, right, to immediately improve safety? So we're working on that right now. And of course, we welcome your comments related to that. So we thank you all for your time, and like I said, we'd love to hear what you have to think, and comments, concerns, questions you have.
Can we ask?
Please.
Okay. This is Kathy. I have a question. You identified the greens, but
Yes.
for me, there's a key green that was left off. And that's
Okay.
at the root of 6 and 64. We call it Washington Square Park. And there's a little sidewalk in the back of it. To me, that is a nice place to create some type of space, whether it's for the bicyclists or people. And that was left off of the discussion about the greens. I saw where you included the Cannon Green, and yet my understanding of the Cannon Green, a couple things. It's the one green that the town was never deeded the right to use it. It's the one piece that stayed with the state. It's got a lot of the veterans memorials on it. So
Okay.
we kind of don't do much there other than the activities for the veterans, which is why
Okay.
I raised the 6 and 64 piece. I think that's also useful to Middle Quarter and that commerce area down there. And it also speaks to the folks that live near there. It's a place that you can sit before you embark on the next leg of your walk, if you're going to choose to go up into the center of town.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting that the highest number population density is at Route 6 and 47, because that's a really crappy place to try to cross the street.
Yes.
My only comment when I see it and you guys put Washington Road, I know what it is because I live there, but I think it would help to say Washington Road and in parentheses put Route 47. So people understand long-term that Washington Road, we have a little bit of influence in, but it's really a state. And the state's the one that decides what can happen on that road. As much as we'd like to think we can, we know we're partners with them, but they speak to a lot of it. I will share, and I guess that didn't get shared in the beginning. I spoke to one of the business owners that has worked at the intersection of 6 and 47 for a long time. They said the traffic pattern changed at 6 and 47 when Connecticut introduced right on red. That's when a lot more of the accidents started to occur. So I don't know if Connecticut's looking to go back to pull back on some of this right on red at some of these types of intersections, but it's such an awkward intersection. And there's no way to put a roundabout. You need that big space so that the big tractor trailer trucks or the big farm trucks that try to make the turn heading north or south have the room to do it. But I found that to be a very interesting comment and observation. And Lord knows they've worked there for a very long time. If anybody knows, they know.
If I can just answer the first part of that. So the legislature required that CTDOT do a right on red elimination study. That passed in 23 and was delivered last year.
Okay,
So it has been done. The result of that study was it doesn't make sense to make a statewide change.
okay,
So the short answer is at the DOT level, there is no formal policy about adding or removing right turn on red restrictions, but that is definitely something we can consider and suggest.
I mean, I'm sure I'd be the most hated person in town for asking for this, but I think it is something worth looking at because it's a really awkward place to cross. It doesn't matter which way you go.
So the reality of of eliminating it isn't just eliminating it, it's the enforcement of it.
Yeah.
Because you can find all throughout, no one's stopping and writing on red anymore, they're just turning.
It's a
left,
rolling
turning
red.
right. And there's places, they just built a brand new intersection at 11. It's 2 lanes turning to 34 and the left lane can't turn right on red, but everyone does.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
and then the other ones just roll through. So, I mean, again, it's an enforcement issue more than it is
Can we
And
put
that's it.
traffic cameras in or speed cameras? Something like that? Wouldn't that help? Or no right on red sign like they have at exit 14?
Yeah, so the no red on red
Yeah.
signs, unfortunately, are often ignored. And it
Yeah.
is an issue we've been raising at the state level as a recurring safety
Right, but
problem.
why can't, for like a quick fix, why couldn't we put like traffic cameras up there and impose tickets for those who do take right on red? Or
Okay.
those who speed coming into town, coming from the south? Why can't we put speed cameras in and make it a revenue generator for the town?
Would it be the town or the state? Both those roads are state roads.
Yeah, so the legislation that passed also several years ago allowing for speed cameras does put it entirely on the towns.
Right.
So
Very
Connecticut's
expensive.
program is a little different than many states. It's a little bit restrictive compared to the way most states do it. And they did so intentionally to prevent it from being targeted against certain populations or against certain towns. But
Would
when
the town
so the,
receive some of the funds from those tickets?
yeah, so in most places, what happens is towns or cities will contract with a private firm who installs the cameras and then effectively pays for them over time with ticket revenue. They have some kind of a revenue sharing model. That is not
There
allowed
has to
here.
be some sort of ROI on that where the town's gonna start making money after a certain time.
I mean, ideally, no, right? Ideally, the town makes no money because everybody follows the rules, but that is never the case. But because
Well,
of that, we don't have a
safety
good
being
answer
the-
for how long it may take.
Safety being the main concern. So if people know they're gonna get tickets and ticketed, chances are they'll slow down coming through the town.
Do
And
the
if they know
townspeople
that
get,
if they take a right on red where there's the camera, there's a good chance that they're gonna get another ticket. So that would eliminate those for the enforcement aspect of it.
Yeah, and the data suggests that safety cameras, automated enforcement cameras, do have a huge impact on safety.
do townspeople get to vote on whether or not there are cameras? Because didn't Kent just vote
And
on
they
it and they
lost.
voted it down?
Yeah, and so in
it's
order,
not that easy a fix
No.
because it's a very,
But then you can't say anything about the
What
safety or the speed if you don't want to take corrective action.
yeah, and so the policy
Not
here,
gonna-
in order for towns to be able to install cameras for speed or red light enforcement, first a proposal has to be prepared, then an ordinance has to be passed with a public involvement process. Once that ordinance is passed, then the state's office of or the office of the state traffic administrator has to review the plan and sign off on it. And that plan has to be renewed every couple of years, as well as any time a location is changed. So it is a tough process. It is worth looking into, and it is something that I think we're going to, examine as part of this study because of the safety benefits are there. But it can be expensive upfront, and it can be challenging for towns to move forward, and so it would have to be something that had pretty broad
So
support.
historically, what's the return on investment for the town if they front load the cost? What's the return? What's like historically been the return for other towns? Has there been a study that says what that return would be? Because if it makes sense for the town to do that, to implement safety features, that would make sense, I would think, to the town. Your number one thing is speeding concerns on Route 6 and difficulty crossing. So if those are two of the top two items that are safety related, why wouldn't we investigate that a little further before I know it was struck down? But why can't we revisit that?
I think there's certainly place as we move forward and develop our recommendations to include this within the toolkit of potential solutions here. I think it's important though for us to also look at there. I think there's some real sightline issues. There's some there might be some smaller things we could do to help improve sightlines, but then also, of course, pair that with improved pedestrian markings that I think better delineate clear paths for pedestrians and encourage drivers to stop that bit further back, and coordinate with local law enforcement to act. We know there's a problem here. It's like a mix of all these things, and I think ultimately, maybe the red light camera is a good solution, but we have to advance some other ideas in parallel at this point.
And just to answer your question, so here in Connecticut, OSTA just approved the first camera program for Washington, the town of Washington. New Haven, Hartford, Waterbury, Stamford are all still looking at it. West Hartford is looking at it. And they're all making progress. They are making progress relatively slowly because the process is a little tough. So ultimately, no, there is no study that has been done because no other state has quite the same model that we have. And so no cameras have been installed in Connecticut yet. And so we don't really have a good sense for at least the revenue side of what that's going to look like here. What we do know is that in places where cameras are installed, it's usually a 60 to 80% reduction in speeding or red light running. And obviously the safety improvement that comes along with that. So in the states that do have active camera programs, it is a pretty notable safety improvement. But again, we don't know. We have no good answers at this point about what cost versus revenue over time would look like with those here in Connecticut.
At this point, should we just put it on that it's a possible solution in the future and we're not going to solve it here right now and move on to other things that we should talk about? Yeah,
And for those
on the
interested, I did
longer
post a
term
link
project.
to what is essentially the definitive FHWA study on the topic that includes both economic and safety analyses of the pros and cons, if anyone's interested in some further reading.
Great.
Tom, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to give a little bit of anecdotal evidence. I'm the owner of the Shell station just north of 6 and 47 there. And I heard earlier that you were saying that everybody could get through the light in one cycle. And there are times I've seen, which I've never seen before, and I've been there for over 25 years, just in this last year or two, where there are certain times of the day when just a large volume of traffic comes from the north going south on 6, and they have to wait at least one cycle sometimes to get through. It gets backed up all the way to way past my station, past the church, and they can't make it through that one light cycle. And that's just something new that I've anecdotally noticed in the last, I'd say 2 years. It never happened before.
Which cross street? Sorry, I missed the beginning.
6, coming down on Route 6 south at the intersection of 6 and 47.
47. Okay. Yep.
Tom, we did address that. Some residents had the same concern. We did call DOT and there was an adjustment made on the timing of the lights, just as there were out here at 6 and 317. So was this recently, Tom, that you saw this?
I've never seen this in 20-something years there, because I just, I'm there all the time, and it's just been happening, I'd say, in the last 2 years.
I sat in it a couple weeks ago.
And it only happens, if you were to try to maybe get a whole hour or two, it wouldn't be a consistent for an hour. It only happens for maybe 3 or 4 cycles. I don't know if it's when they're coming out of the school or it's just the middle of the day and it's a lot of people coming down Route 6. I think more people use Route 6 it's
probably because it's because there's such a long distance before the next upstream signal. These platoons can build up in length,
right?
Number of cars, especially if you have a slower driver at the head, you can sort of pick up picked up a bit of a train. And so it sounds to me like that, yeah, it sort of brings some instantaneous demand that is well above sort of the average over a 15-minute or hour period. Honestly, if you're saying it happens once or twice and then it clears, to us, that's actually the signal generally working.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes,
it's
it does
not
clear.
necessarily designed to handle these really instantaneous fluctuations. It's more like, does over the course of a cycle or two, does it clear that like unique off cycle occurrence? I don't know, Ashley, if there's anything in particular you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I think everything you said, Casey, that's exactly what I was going to reiterate. And the other thing too is like, if you were saying it happens for an hour or 2 hours consistently, then yeah, then we can relook at the signals again. Maybe the adjustments weren't enough. But if it's kind of instantaneous, like Casey said, platoons build and the signal's doing its job, if after 2 or 3 cycles, it's cleared. So, but it's still something we can note. And keep an eye on as we start to like make recommendations or potentially change lane configurations or anything, or adding pedestrian crossings. It's definitely something to keep in mind that if it's happening a little bit in a 15-minute period or once every hour or something, that it might happen more consistently. So we need to keep that in mind.
And frankly, from a safety perspective, we're going to investigate potential left turn lanes at this intersection.
Exactly.
So that would also help. I mean, there's going to be some potential widening challenges. So we're going to have to weigh the pros and cons of that. But I think no matter what, that would help as well. Especially because if those westbound platoons get held up by a left turning vehicle and there's really not the space for the through vehicles to bypass them, that can also contribute to one of your instances where a queue kind of temporarily builds quickly and then dissipates.
I just have 2 other comments. I can't find the slide where you talked about where pedestrian crossings were missing. One of the things I think that should be included, and I realize this might be a little bit into the future, is a crossing at Route 6 and Middle Road Turnpike. Middle Road Turnpike is the main road to the high school. Many people walk it. It also, Strong Field, which is slightly up, has a little crosswalk. I mean, long term, we hope to get there, but I don't think that should be left out of the future, if you will.
Yeah.
The other thing I have a question on, I know in Watertown, they established a pedestrian zone. And when I think about speeds on Main Street, I remember somebody at one of the meetings that I went where they said the speed started at 40 when you first got to town, then went to 35, halfway up to Old Sherman Hill. And then from there, it went down to 30. Does it make sense to look at one speed from when we start to come into town, at least to get us through Landers Road and heading further north, so that there's a consistency that, you know, oh, I'm at 35 and, you know, we know people aren't doing 35, they're doing more than that. So I didn't know if that's
I think the answer is definitely yes, that's so I think as part of our recommendations, we're planning on evaluating multiple ways to help better create that transition between the rural arterial segments to the north and south and the more built up areas downtown. And that will include a combination of signing and speed limit evaluation and potential recommendations to do as you suggest, maybe make it a little bit simpler. Hey, it's 40 and then here it goes down just to 30, whatever it is. So we'll evaluate that, but also we're going to be developing contextual recommendations, looking at, you know, should there be, you know, well, if we look at increasing sidewalks, that will help. Pedestrian activity helps slow people down, but we have to evaluate potential landscaping or other elements to change the roadway context as well. Because unfortunately, just the sign doesn't actually do it. We need to create the environment that says to the driver, not just look at the sign, but hey, this is a pedestrian zone. And it's obvious because of X, Y, and Z, whether that be sidewalks, pedestrian activity, landscaping. And I think you have it right in the core. I think it's kind of ensuring that there's a transition where we want it to be to help encourage people slowing down through those entry nodes.
And to add to that, Casey, so what at some of these entrances that I've done before is what Casey's talking about, making sure they're slowing down and feeling like they're changing the type of road they're getting into. They're getting into a more pedestrian active zone, all of that. There's like traffic calming measures and not just landscaping and stuff. There's even painting markings and such that we've used to help really emphasize like, hey, we're starting to slow down here. Like you need to bring the speed down. And that's a combination of pavement markings and also width of the road. And I know there's requirements because it is Route 6, how wide it has to be, the shoulders, but I think there's some really wide parts of this corridor that can be adjusted as well.
Yeah, of course. I have a question while you're on that. This is Judith. There continues to be an issue, a daily issue. I see it, whether I'm walking, and there's only one person that walks more in town than me, and that's Kathy. I do an awful lot of walking, so I see it when I'm walking, I see it when I'm driving, particularly coming from the south. And that is people who continue to pass around on the right, whether you're in a car and you're making a left-hand turn, or you're just following the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, the people think you're driving too slowly, and they will come around you where it's wide enough to do that. I've often been, they'll come around on the right to pass you because you're driving what they perceive as too slowly. Even though you're not even turning. I've had people pass me on the right, let's say from here, from this location, and stay in that imagined lane till Mountain Road.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a huge issue that I think has to be looked at, and a solution has to come up. You have to come up with. And the other safety issue with that is that I have been a pedestrian trying to cross at the crosswalk by Mountain Road, and a person will stop the car coming from the south, but the person behind them isn't going to stop, and they go around them and almost hit me. So that I'm interested in hearing what you're thinking about in terms of a solution for that. Is it widening the road there, all the way down? What do you think?
So I don't think widening the road is actually going to help with those.
I don't either.
There's when you were starting to talk about the left turns, and there is some benefit if you don't have a left turn lane to providing like an 8-foot shoulder, but that's that's very car centric, and it really, if there's any bicycle activity, is not great from that perspective. So I think it kind of is the same answer we had to the previous question, that we need to use all the design tools and all of the enforcement tools to try to address what is frankly just bad driver behavior, by really designing a place that visually prioritizes pedestrians in ways that it does not today, that can help a little bit with that guy who is cutting through from I-84 to the Route 8 corridor and just is trying to get through as quick as he can. If he, that's it's really back to get the transitions, really try to reinforce to drivers that this isn't a quick cut through where that kind of behavior is acceptable. But at the end of the day, that behavior is not acceptable anywhere at any time. And that's where, I think we have to, we'll certainly continue to relay these issues, through this committee and to, both local, traffic enforcement.
And can I also say, from a design standpoint and from somebody who sits on the historic commission, the last thing we want to see is more signage. So if there's a way to do that without putting more signs up, think about that.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. Yeah, I don't think there's putting up a sign to not pass people on the right would be a worthwhile, polluting of the visibility, right? It's the stuff we're talking about is more like trees. And that, of course, I think would get back to working with the Historic Commission to making sure we understand what the appropriate landscaping additions would be. But it's really more build up the feel of the downtown even more with the character it already has. Not, throwing more traffic signs is actually just all it makes drivers do is think of it as even more of a car-centric place if all they see is more yellow signs talking to them.
Yeah, and some of these may be long-term and short-term, right? So there's in terms of slowing people down and avoiding that right turn, that cars going around on the right, which you're one of many to have mentioned that as being a problem. Long-term, there's things you can do that are involve more major construction. There's also short-term things you can also do with bollards and such and landscaping to sort of at least provide, at least to disallow that movement. While being quicker, easier to implement, right?
Yeah, CTDOT has rolled out a new policy and procedure for what they call quick build projects. So things with temporary materials. And so, yes.
Who has?
CTDOT, the Department of Transportation.
Is it online?
That's a good question.
That's good news.
It's ultimately a resource for towns and regional planning agencies, but it is the result of work that we did over the summer, not of this past year, but the year prior, with an organization called Smart Growth America. And so it's not necessarily a perfect answer every time, but it does mean that we can try some things.
It's something.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
I just put a link to it in the
before you
chat.
spend millions.
Oh,
Wait a minute, there it is.
We can
That's
send
right.
out all of
Thank
the.
Oh,
We
great.
can
Thank
send
you.
out a link to that as well. But yeah,
Okay.
it is online. And it
Okay.
offers both process and some guidance on materials as well. Process, eligible projects, and materials.
Oh, great.
And so one of the things that offers, though, is the ability to try something before we make it permanent.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're stuck for another 40 years until that project.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a real issue, especially in downtown
right.
areas, and especially when those downtown
Small
areas
town.
are
Right.
by state roads.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially when the quick, quote unquote, quick fix could just start changing behaviors and all, and then it helps
take
you
care of
guide
it.
the rest of the steps.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Rich.
Very detailed, very impressive report. Thank you.
Nice.
You cover a
lot of ground.
lot of ground, all our big asks, so much appreciated.
And we
Thank
look
you.
forward. So I think appreciate the comment in particular on the potential for utilizing the green site that we missed at Route 64. So we're excited to because we had some issues on the traffic data collection side, namely coordinating with CTDOT about what results they would accept. We got a little delayed over the past few months. We're actually really excited now to kind of push through with some of the recommendations we've been kind of thinking of, and look forward to kind of expediting that over the next 3 to 6 months or so.
Cool. Great. We're excited as well.
Yes. Excuse me, this is Barbara Perkinson. Can you explain the process for the February 18th public outreach meeting? Do you send out notification? Should there be an article in Voices to that fact? It should be on social media. Of course, it would be on our webpage. I think the more public we get to respond to some of these issues, the better. And I don't know what COG does on their end to promote this public hearing or public meeting.
Yeah, so we just finalized a flyer for the meeting. So we'll make sure that you get a copy of that to post to the town website. We will be sharing via our social media.
Okay.
I don't know how far our social media goes here in town. So if the town could amplify that through whatever channels that you have, that's very helpful.
It's on your calendar.
It is on our agency's calendar, which again, I have no idea how many people even know is there, but we have a paid ad we'll be running in the local paper
Okay.
as a public notice.
Just so you know, their deadline is Friday at 4 o'clock for the next issue. We only get a once a week issue of this newspaper.
Yeah, we actually submitted the final language yesterday.
Thank
So,
you. Good, thank you.
So that'll run in next week's paper. So that's what we have planned right now. If you have other suggestions for how to get it out there, though, please let us know.
Well,
I
some
totally
people
agree.
will say, we didn't know anything about it. I've already
Always.
gotten remarks on that on another issue. I can't hand deliver to every.
Resident.
But we can make
resident.
sure some of the
Yes.
local forms that
So-
aren't controlled by the town
Mhm.
get it, and
Yeah,
they
if
post
there's-
it. They have a wider reach
If
than
there's like a Woodbury Facebook
Woodbury
group,
open
that's
Yes,
forum.
really-
Yes.
We could take the flyer and pop it in
Mhm.
Region 14 and get permission.
Yes, Region 14 would be a good
That
one.
would be, I mean, I think the answer is any and all is encouraged, and
So if
we
you could share
recognize
the
that
flyer
you guys
with
in the
us
room.
as well, then we'll share it with people we
The
know that have
chamber.
the
Right.
chamber, right? That would be great.
Yeah, we agree though. The more people that can be there, the more ideas we can share on
Right.
this. The
Now, will
Ahead
this
of
be
time,
at a
'cause after
public
they'll complain.
location, or will it be via
It's gonna be in
Zoom?
the senior.
Senior center.
And-
Senior,
and-
okay.
Yeah, it'll be both. And so the other piece too is we will record and make it available after.
Great.
So if anybody can't attend but wanted to,
Okay.
or doesn't want to attend but wants to see what was talked about, it'll be available.
If somebody
Thank you.
couldn't come to the meeting and had comments they wanted to share,
Mhm.
is there an email they should send it to, or how would that work? Like, I know somebody that can't make the meeting, but would probably want to provide comments.
Yeah, so info@nvcogct.gov. We take comments on everything
Okay.
we do ever. There's also my direct contact information is on the project page on our website.
Okay.
Could you put that info on the flyer, that info,
Yeah.
NVCOG.
link on the flyer?
So we have right now the project page link on the flyer.
Open. That's
If
good.
that- if
That's
that's okay,
good.
and that has
Yeah,
the
because I could
direct-
see
Yeah,
information.
yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, so we have
Yeah, it
the,
is there.
and so in the press release that'll go out as well, or in the public notice, we have information about language assistance, if anybody needs language assistance, as well as contact information for us.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
And then after the meeting, the public information meeting, you look to spring to early summer. Do you have any target dates you're targeting now for the next, after you get the feedback from the public information meeting? Do you have any target dates with this group or with your group for a draft of the proposals and things? Or you're not there yet?
I don't know, Evan and Casey, do you have an answer for that question?
I can, yeah, I'm pulling up right now. We have a schedule that we updated within the last 2 to 3 weeks. I'm just going to pull it up before I speak to it. Oh, it's in the schedule folder, not the budget folder. Duh. Okay. So I think we're looking at essentially presenting the recommendations in late March, probably to this advisory committee.
Okay.
And then we would follow that up
That's good.
That is.
in early April with the CONDOT specifics. So we would meet with DOT to kind of go through some of the technical recommendations, right, to their road and all that. And then be able to have a public meeting, which I'm showing in kind of mid-May. So that, obviously with the public meetings, we like to try and get those done before schools are out. So that's, I think, our sort of biggest target. But with that said, I think we'd be looking to share like in the same vein we shared this existing conditions presentation with this advisory committee on and around the end of March for that kind of review cycle.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good news.
It is.
Yeah, and so just a little for what happens next, right? Once the study is actually done, the last thing we ever want is to do all this work and then have it sit there and turn into nothing. And so, obviously we will be looking for funding sources that the town can use to move things forward, independent of the department. They still need to review and sign off on anything. There's a process called an encroachment permit. Any work that somebody does on a state road that is not the state has to get. And that is true for quick build and long-term solutions.
Right.
But we as the COG go to the DOT and do a presentation on the recommendations when it's all done. And encourage the project development unit there to consider pieces of it, or ideally all of it, but likely it'll get done in pieces. for them to take up and move forward as state projects. So there's some questions about the rate of state projects over the next few years. Obviously, federal money has been impacted, and so we may see a slowdown in the way these projects are moving. But we're still hopeful. I mean, this is a good project that aligns closely with DOT's goals and with the goals of the current governor and his administration. So I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be a highly scoring project as they go to program out their money.
Well, and I get an email, I forget, it's the group that's associated with Connecticut Children's Hospital for
Watch for me.
Watch for Me. And yesterday they released the current speeding and all that good stuff. And in the back of it was nice. They have this pedestrian and bicycle funding opportunities, and it's several pages with long-term ideas. So I'm assuming that's the kind of information you're going to help get for us for future, and that
Exactly.
I saw where small things can make a big difference, and they had the safe system pyramid. I assume you're incorporating some of these kinds of things into the final process. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's a really good resource. If I could make one suggestion to a COG to ask the DOT, we have a drunk driving week, a cell phone week. Could they please do a pedestrian awareness week where the state blasts and reminds people what their responsibilities are, both as pedestrian and cars? They do all the others, but they don't do anything for pedestrian week.
And one of the we've actually had a lot of change, the legislation around being a driver around pedestrians lately. And so I agree. I think that's
Okay.
getting more of that word out is important.
Thank you.
Yeah, we actually, so we serve on an advisory committee basically for Watch for Me, who is a fantastic
They
resource.
put
He
out a
is
lot of great
incredible.
stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of good things on their Facebook page
Mhm.
that can be pulled and used. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, unless there's any other questions, to the point earlier though, this is not the only chance. You know, if something comes up when you get home and you want to send me more thoughts or anything else, if you don't have my email address, I have cards I can give you, or it's on the project page on our website. But please, feel free to reach out at any point if you have ideas, if you have questions, if you have concerns about anything. And then, like Casey said, we'll be in touch relatively soon with some of the recommendations and the next pieces of the document.
I just appreciate you guys all coming out today because it was really very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
This is awesome.